Why did no one look at her when she walked past the operations tent? Was it the crutches, the slow weight shift, or something deeper, something quieter, the kind of wound no medic could stitch? Staff Sergeant Marin moved across the hot Afghan dust like every step cost a memory. Dust on her boots, pain knifing down her leg with each movement. She kept her breathing quiet, steady, controlled. Pain was a familiar enemy. Loud enemies she could face. Quiet ones, those were harder. Her left leg didn't bend the way it used to. Not anymore. It had been 3 days since the blast. 3 days since metal screamed, fire roared, and the world flipped into a furnace. 3 days since she dragged a man from hell with nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness holding her together. She didn't tell anyone that her hands still shook at night. A couple of medics glanced at her, then quickly looked away, not disrespectfully, more like people who didn't know what to say. Sympathy wasn't cruel, but pity could cut deeper than shrapnel. She hated pity. At the edge of the supply depot, they were waiting, young, bronzed, swaggering in designer sunglasses, freshly deployed, smelling like new gear and confidence. Navy SEALs. Clean uniforms, clean boots. Untouched by this dirt, this heat, this war, not yet. One nudged the other and whispered, not quietly enough. "Check that out, war hero, huh?" Another laughed. "Looks like she's done. Maybe she should have stayed home. Should we get her a scooter?" Laughter, sun-soaked, careless. Not evil, just ignorant. Marin didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't break stride. She kept her jaw locked, eyes forward, heart steady. She'd heard worse from enemies who meant it. Still, a part of her stung, a tiny ember warming in her chest, somewhere between anger and sorrow. If only they knew. But she didn't waste breath on explanations. A soldier's worth couldn't be shouted, it was lived, earned, survived. Another voice cut across the whispers, different tone, sharper bite. "Hey, Sergeant," one called, louder now, stepping closer. "We can call medical if you need wheels, don't push yourself." That one was masking insecurity, she heard it in his voice. Trying to impress the others, trying too hard. She stopped, turned her head slowly, her face still unreadable. "I'm fine," she said, calm as steel, cooling. "Thank you." "You don't look fine," he said, smirking. "What happened? Trip on a rock, training accident?" The laugh that followed wasn't big, but it was enough. Inside her chest, something twitched, not pride, not ego, something simpler, something tired. If only they knew. But they didn't, not yet. Her fingers tightened around the crutch grip. Pain shot up her leg. She welcomed it. Pain was truth. Pain didn't lie. Pain didn't pretend. She opened her mouth to speak. She wasn't on a base. The voice didn't just interrupt, it sliced the air open. Strong, steady, command like steel through velvet. Every SEAL turned. General Marcus Stone stood 20 feet away, sunlight cutting across his uniform, crutches planted firm, left leg wrapped in gauze, the same injury, the same road of pain that Marin walked. His stare could silence artillery. Silence fell so hard, even the wind seemed to pause. One of the SEALs straightened instinctively. "Sir." "I know what you didn't," General Stone said, stepping forward, slow, intentional, each step like a mirror of Marin's, balance, strain, determination carved into bone. He approached the group, not fast but inevitable. His voice lowered, heavy with weight only those who'd bled could carry. "You see a limp," he said. "I see survival." Dust swirled around their boots, heat shimmered in the air, time stretched. Marin didn't move, didn't blink, didn't save the SEALs, let truth hang. General Stone stopped beside her, breathing steady but tense. Pain lived under his skin too. "I've been looking for you, Sergeant Cade," he said quietly, and for the first time since the blast, something warm flickered through her, recognition. Respect. Shared battlefields. Fire passed between them like a flag in war. "Sir," she replied, voice barely above a whisper, not weak but reverent. Then he turned to the SEALs. You want to know what happened to her leg? Stone asked softly, too softly, the kind of quiet that carries thunder underneath. 3 days ago, our convoy hit a command-detonated IED. Lead vehicle flipped, ammunition cooking off, fire everywhere. No one breathed. I was inside. A tiny shift in the SEAL's posture, shoulders pulled back, jaws clenched, realization cracking through arrogance like lightning hitting sand. I was unconscious, the general continued, pinned, bleeding out, seconds from burning alive. Then his tone sharpened, a blade unsheathed. She dragged me from that fire, he said, 200 meters under enemy fire, with a shattered tibia, bone fragments cutting through muscle. She stopped the bleeding on 3 soldiers, including me. She held pressure for 47 minutes until the medevac arrived. Silence, absolute crushing. The tallest SEAL, pale now, whispered, "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," Stone replied, cold, precise, judgment without anger, the worst kind. "You saw crutches and assumed weakness. Ignorance is forgivable, disrespect is not." A beat of silence, 2, 3. Marin's chest tightened, not from pride, from vulnerability, from someone speaking the truth she never asked to be spoken. General Stone raised a trembling hand, salute crisp despite the pain. A 3-star general saluting a staff sergeant. Her throat tightened, eyes pricked, control almost slipped almost. She returned the salute, posture iron straight, jaw firm. Not emotional, just human. "Thank you," the general said softly, "only for her, for my life." She swallowed, "Just doing my job, sir." "No," he whispered, "you went beyond the job." The wind sighed around them, dust lifted, heat swayed like a curtain. He turned back to the SEALs, young warriors suddenly looking very, very small. "When you laugh at her," he said, "you laugh at me, and at every wounded soldier who earned scars you can't comprehend." They stood frozen, embarrassed, humbled, changed. One finally whispered, "We're sorry, Sergeant." His voice shook, genuine, the kind of apology that came from truth hitting bone. Marin nodded once, acceptance, not softness. She didn't need punishment. She didn't need revenge. She had her dignity, heavier than any weapon she ever carried. The general stepped beside her again. Same pace, same limp, same battlefield in their bones. "How's the leg?" he asked quietly as they moved. "Manageable," she replied. "Liar," he murmured, a small grin tugging the corner of his mouth. Her lips twitched, not a smile, but close enough to feel like one, the first in days, maybe longer. They walked slowly, 2 soldiers bound by fire and silence, moving through a world that had no idea what they'd crawled through to still be standing. Well, standing enough. Pain throbbed in her leg, deep and relentless, but pain was a reminder you lived. And beneath that pain, under the ache and dust and humiliation and pride, another feeling stirred. Something fragile. Hope. Because sometimes strength wasn't kicking down doors or charging into battle. Sometimes strength was simply taking another step. Even when every part of you begged to rest. Even when no one else saw the fight. Sometimes the hardest battles were the quiet ones, the ones no one applauded, the ones fought alone at night with ghosts. She breathed in dust, heat, memory, and kept walking. Because she wasn't done yet. Because scars weren't shame, they were proof of return. And because somewhere deep in her chest, beyond fear and fatigue, a fire kept burning. She didn't need recognition. She didn't need applause. She just needed the strength to keep going. One step, then another, and another. Because dignity didn't swagger, it didn't shout. It walked slow, steady, painful, proud. And sometimes that was louder than any battle cry. Why did night's quiet always feel heavier after you survived fire? Hours later, the base finally exhaled into silence. Generators hummed low. Dust settled. The heat retreated into the ground like a tired animal. Marines played cards in the corner of the tent city. Helicopters rested like metal beasts sleeping in their pens. And Marin lay awake on a narrow cot, staring at canvas overhead like it held answers she hadn't earned yet. Pain pulsed through her legs, steady, rhythmic, almost alive. She breathed slowly, letting it pass through her. Pain was part of her now, a companion, an unwelcome one but honest. She could face honest things. What she struggled with were the unseen enemies: doubt, memory, silence. The whispers from the seals earlier didn't hurt her pride. Pride was armor she learned not to wear too tightly, because armor, if worn too long, could become a cage. What hurt was something else, something quiet. Why do they always assume weakness first? Not they, the world. Outsiders. People who had never felt the ground melt under them or heard the sound a burning vehicle makes when its metal screams. People who had never trembled alone after adrenaline faded, praying no one saw the shake in their hands. She turned her head slightly. The cot across from her sat empty, sheets still neat. The soldier assigned to it had never come back from the convoy. She had dragged him, too, but his wounds had been deeper. He had stopped breathing halfway to the medic. She still felt the weight of his body sometimes, not physical weight, but the weight of failure whispered into her bones. It was irrational. She had saved the general. She had saved 2 others, but grief didn't respect math. It counted differently. Her fingers curled into the blanket. Sometimes survival felt selfish. Footsteps echoed outside. Intentional, steady. Familiar rhythm: pause, wait, shift, crutch, next step. She recognized the pattern instantly. Her heartbeat changed. Shame flickered, not for anything she'd done, but because she didn't want him to see her vulnerable, raw. General Stone paused at the entrance. The flap rustled. "You awake?" he asked quietly. She could have lied, could have turned away and feigned sleep, but something inside her refused lies tonight. "Yes, sir." He stepped inside, slow, careful. Even in pain, he held presence like a torch, the kind of leader whose silence meant more than most men's speeches. He sat on an empty crate, breath controlled but strained. They didn't speak for a moment. Shared silence wasn't awkward, it was recognition, like 2 veterans watching the same battlefield burn behind their eyes. "I should have found you sooner," he said finally. "You found me," she replied. "Not soon enough." Her throat tightened. She looked away, staring at the dirt floor. "I didn't save you for thanks," she whispered. "I know," he cleared his throat lightly. "That's why it mattered." She wasn't prepared for that answer. It hit where she guarded most. The part of her still learning it was okay to value herself beyond her utility. Outside, a dog barked once. Wind brushed canvas walls. Night felt wide, stretching into infinity. "You didn't eat dinner," he said, eyes narrowing at the unopened ration on the table. "Lost appetite," she murmured. Pain did that. So did exhaustion. So did remembering faces you couldn't save. He studied her, not the way commanders study reports. The way people study storms, understanding beauty and danger intertwined. "Cade," he said softly, "heroism feels heavy. It's not glory, it's cost." For a second she wanted to look at him. But she was afraid if she did, he'd see everything in her she was still wrestling with. Fear, doubt, exhaustion, the quiet grief of someone who survives more than she thinks she deserves. "Sir," she whispered, "can I ask something?" "Anything." "Why were you there? On that road? Generals don't usually ride lead convoys through active zones." A shadow crossed his face. Not shame, memory. "There was someone I needed to see," he said slowly. "A young lieutenant, good soldier, brilliant mind, made a mistake, thought he was alone in it. He was." Stone's jaw clenched. "I was going to pull him back before command ended his career." "And?" "He was in the lead vehicle," the general said, voice low. "He didn't make it." Her breath caught. The explanation settled like cold stone inside her. He hadn't been riding point for glory. He'd been riding point for loyalty. Death always stole the ones who cared most. Silence again, but this one felt different, heavier, shared grief not spoken but felt. She turned her head finally, their eyes met. "It wasn't your fault," she said. He gave a hollow smile. "Funny, I was about to tell you the same thing." A breath escaped her, sharp, like someone pulling a splinter of emotion loose, the kind that bleeds before it heals. He didn't push further. Good leaders knew when not to speak. "They'll never understand," she murmured. "The ones who laugh, the ones who think pain equals weakness." "They don't need to," he replied. "We don't serve for understanding." "Then why do we serve?" His answer came without hesitation. "So others never have to face the things we already survived." She let that sit. It didn't fix everything, but it gave shape to something inside her that felt directionless. Stone stood, wincing as weight pressed into his injured leg. "Rest. Tomorrow will be long." She almost laughed. "They all are." He smirked softly, "Some longer than others." He turned to leave, paused, then added quietly, "There's a command evaluation team arriving at 900. They asked about you." She blinked. "Sir." His eyes warmed, pride, respect, something deeper. "They don't send evaluation team to observe average soldiers." He held her gaze. "Don't underestimate what you did or what you are." Then he was gone, leaving only the whisper of canvas and quiet truth behind him. She stared at the tent ceiling, chest tight from something she rarely allowed herself to feel with clarity. Worth. Not pride. Not arrogance. Just worth. Yet as sleep approached, her breathing hitched for a different reason, memory rising uninvited, thick as smoke. The heat. The explosion. The scream of metal. The weight of his body dragging behind her. The burning air. Her leg snapping when she planted wrong, but she didn't stop. Couldn't. The rounds cracking the dirt near her feet. His blood on her hands. Her own blood soaking into her boot. The medic yelling, she shouldn't be conscious, keep her awake. Her voice slurred but steady, get him first. Her fingers clenched the blanket. Fear wasn't in the blast. Fear came after, in silence, when no one was watching, when the adrenaline faded and reality crept in like cold through broken windows. She inhaled slow. Exhaled steady. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of not being worth the life she saved. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, not gently, but like gravity taking something that had been held up too long. In the quiet of night, with crutches against the bed and pain whispering reminders, Marin slept. Not peacefully, but bravely. And outside, unseen, dawn waited, because morning always comes, even for soldiers who think they might break before it does. Especially for them. And tomorrow, the world would test her again. Not with bullets. With judgment, expectation, scrutiny, the silent battles so few respected. But she would rise. Because she always did. Because strength wasn't loud. It wasn't clean. It wasn't fearless. Strength was waking up again. Even when the world didn't see. Even when your body hurt. Even when doubt chewed at the edges of your spirit. She was still here. And sometimes, that was the bravest thing a soldier could be. Why did sunlight feel harsher on days you had to prove yourself again? Morning burned across the base like a silent test. Helicopters thumped in the distance. Radios crackled. Boots moved in rhythm, soldiers waking, eating, working, surviving. The world didn't slow for wounds, especially invisible ones. Marin sat upright on the cot, jaw tight as she wrapped a fresh layer of bandages around her leg. The wound throbbed deep, pulsing, stubborn, a reminder, not of weakness, of cost. Pain meant she had earned her place here. The crutches rested against the wall like patient wolves. She stared at them for a moment. They stared back. Silent challenge, stand again, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Her fingers hovered over them, then gripped. One breath, too. She pushed up. White-hot pain shot through her leg, stealing her breath, bending her spine for one desperate second. She gritted teeth, jaw trembling not from weakness, from determination. She forced weight into her arms, steadied herself, inhaled slow. Balance found, pain caged but alive. She didn't wait for it to pass. She moved. Weakness waited. Strength acted anyway. Outside, sunlight stabbed at her eyes. Dry air scraped her lungs. Afghan mornings weren't gentle. They woke you with reality. Voices echoed near the command building, clipped, polished, unfamiliar. Evaluation team. Inspectors. Officers in crisp uniforms, untouched by dust, carrying pens instead of rifles. People who decided careers from conference rooms. Her stomach tightened. She hated attention, hated scrutiny. She preferred missions where the only judge was survival. A young corporal jogged toward her, pausing when he saw she was moving slow. "Ma'am, us Sergeant Cade, they're waiting." "I'm aware," she murmured. "I could get a vehicle," he offered quickly, "or—" She cut him off, voice firm but controlled. "I walk." He hesitated, unsure whether to argue. Then he nodded and stepped aside. "Yes, ma'am." She passed him, each step measured. She wasn't proving anything to spectators. She was proving it to herself, to doubt, to memory. Ahead, a group of officers stood in a semicircle. 2 majors, a colonel, a civilian woman with a tablet, intelligence probably. Evaluators always brought someone who looked like they knew secrets. It made them feel indispensable. General Stone stood beside them, posture sharp, uniform immaculate, crutches under both arms. Their eyes shifted as she approached. Some widened in surprise, she moved better than they expected. Some softened in pity, she hated those the most. The civilian's gaze stayed neutral, unreadable, observant. A colonel stepped forward. Rigid stance, polished boots, ribbons displayed like armor. "Staff Sergeant Cade," he said, "thank you for joining us." She nodded. "Sir, we're here to conduct a post-incident review. Understand this is standard protocol." She did understand, on paper at least. In truth, post-incident reviews rarely cared about truth. They cared about process, liability, appearances. He continued, tone formal. "We've reviewed the initial reports. There are questions." Of course there were. Stone shifted slightly, jaw tightening. He didn't like the emphasis. He had seen war. He knew heroism didn't always fit regulations. The civilian woman spoke next. Voice softer, analytical. "Walk us through it, from the blast to evacuation." Marin inhaled slowly. The world narrowed not to fear but to memory. She didn't romanticize war. She remembered facts. Pain, fire, choices. She spoke, voice quiet but precise. "We were moving through a dry riverbed. Anticipated threat, medium. Route clearance ahead. IED detectors didn't pick anything up." "Why not?" one major asked, tone slightly accusing. "Command detonation," she replied. "Buried deep, not pressure plate." The woman nodded. The major scribbled. Marin continued. "Lead vehicle hit. Explosion flipped it. Fire ignited fuel. Ammo started cooking off." "And you exited your vehicle immediately?" the colonel asked. "Yes. With an injury." "I didn't feel it yet, sir." "Pain came later. Duty came first." "You moved toward the burning vehicle," the woman said, less a question, more confirmation. "Yes." "Against protocol," the second major muttered. Stone's head snapped toward him. Protocol did not apply. Survival did. The major swallowed, quiet. Marin didn't react. She continued, simple and unembellished. "I approached, dragged General Stone out. Enemy fire from 3 angles, held cover position, applied pressure to his femoral artery, stabilized 2 others, maintained until medevac." "Under fire," the colonel repeated, voice cooled by disbelief. "Yes," she answered calmly. "And your leg?" the civilian asked. "Shattered on initial blast, bone fragments. I stayed conscious until extraction." Silence. Even the evaluators paused, not in disbelief, but in the gravity of human endurance. The first major finally spoke, voice softer. "Why you? Why not assign another able-bodied soldier once you realized?" "Because time," she said. "Because he was bleeding out, because others were disoriented." A pause, then simply, "Because no one else was there yet." Not self-praise, not drama, truth. Heroes didn't wait for orders. They acted because waiting meant death. The colonel cleared his throat. "There is concern you placed yourself at unnecessary risk." She lifted her eyes slowly, locking onto his. Calm, steady, unshakable. "If I hadn't, he'd be dead." The civilian woman exhaled. The closest someone like her got to admiration. Stone finally spoke, voice grounded like bedrock. "Sergeant Cade made the correct choice." "No one questions your survival," the second major said carefully. "We question procedure." Stone stepped forward, pain in every movement, dignity in every second. "You question with pens," he said. She answered with blood. The officers stiffened. They hadn't expected a general to defend like this. Evaluators liked control. They didn't like when truth slapped back. Marin stood silent, spine straight, leg aching, heart steady. She didn't need to speak. Stone spoke for her now, but only because she had spoken with action before he ever could. The civilian finally broke the tension. "We have what we need." She closed her tablet slowly. "Sergeant Cade, off the record, you saved lives under fire with a compromised limb. That's," she searched for a word she rarely used, "extraordinary." Marin didn't move, didn't react. Emotion was a luxury she rationed carefully. But a small flicker warmed behind her ribs, something quiet, steady. Validation wasn't sought, but it landed gentle. The group dispersed slowly, murmuring, processing. The colonel shook her hand, stiff but respectful. The majors nodded, humbled. The civilian gave the slightest bow of her head, a silent salute of equals. When they left, only Stone remained. He exhaled a long breath, shoulders easing. "Evaluators exhaust me more than insurgents," he muttered. Despite herself, she almost smiled. "You did well," he said. "Just told the truth." "Truth," Stone murmured, "isn't always enough for people who measure bravery by paperwork." She looked down at her leg, then up at the mountains in the distance, jagged silhouettes carved against the burning sky. "Do you ever feel tired of proving you deserve to stand where you stand?" she asked suddenly. He studied her, really looked. Age and battle lines etched his face, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Yes," he said, "every day." "A beat you." She didn't answer immediately. Her breath trembled once, imperceptible unless someone had lived inside their own ribcage through war. "Yes," she whispered, "every day." He nodded, not pitying, not consoling, understanding. Then he asked quietly, "You think you'll regret saving me?" She didn't hesitate. "No," she said, "I only regret I couldn't save more." Stone closed his eyes for one moment. Not weakness, wait. "You saved who you could," he whispered. "That doesn't always feel like enough." It never does. Wind rolled across the sand. A helicopter lifted somewhere behind them, blades chopping through stillness. The world moved on, but their moment held. "You know," Stone said softly, "when those SEALs laughed yesterday, I saw something in you." "What?" "Restraint. Restraint is harder than rage." She looked at him, eyes darker with thought. "I wasn't angry at them," she said. "I was tired." A pause. "I just didn't have the energy to defend myself." Stone's jaw clenched, something like sadness flickering. The world shouldn't demand that the wounded explain why they hurt. No answer. Just truth hanging between them like a flag no one wanted to raise because it meant admitting how war stains those who return. He glanced toward the barracks. "Walk with me." She nodded. They moved side by side, two warriors, same limp, same scar, different rank but equal ground. Soldiers watched as they passed, not with pity but with something else now. Respect, awareness, shame for yesterday, admiration for quiet strength. A young private stood straighter when she approached, not fear but reverence. He saluted. She returned it. No words, none needed. A female medic jogged over, breathless. "Sergeant Cade," she said softly, cheeks flushed with nervous respect. "I heard what you did. Ma'am, if you ever need anything or just to talk." Marin blinked, caught off guard. Kindness always disarmed more deeply than hostility. "Thank you," she said quietly. The medic nodded and hurried off before emotion betrayed her. Stone murmured, "You changed things yesterday." "No," Marin replied, "you did." "We did," he corrected. They walked until silence felt comfortable again. Pain flickered in her leg, but she didn't stop. Endurance wasn't noise, it was persistence. Finally, Stone asked, voice low, almost fragile, "Do you think you'll ever forgive yourself for surviving when others did?" She didn't look at him, didn't trust her voice at first. Then, "No," she breathed, "but I'll learn to live with it." Stone nodded slowly, with the weary agreement of someone who'd made the same truce long ago. "Good," he whispered. "That's the only way any of us stay standing." And they kept walking, two soldiers against the world, moving forward not because it didn't hurt, but because stopping hurt worse. Some victories had no medals. Some battles left no records. Some heroes limped, and no one knew why. But step by step, silently, painfully, they proved something truth never needed to shout. Survival is not weakness. Endurance is not quiet failure. And scars seen or unseen are not shame. They are stories. And she was still writing hers. Why did the body remember pain after the mind tried to forget it? Hours later, the desert wind shifted, temperature dropping, shadows stretching across the outpost like long, tired arms. Evening in Afghanistan wasn't peaceful. It was haunting. The quiet felt earned, not given. Like the land only allowed silence once it decided enough blood had been spilled for the day. Marin sat outside the barracks, crutches resting beside her, hands wrapped around a tin cup of bitter coffee. Soldiers moved around her, some laughing too loudly, trying to drown their thoughts, others speaking softly, trying not to stir them. She sat alone. Not because she wanted to be isolated, but because solitude felt like armor. When you carried memories like shrapnel under the skin, people got too close, and sometimes they got cut. A shadow fell across her. Boots stopped in front of her, polished, unfamiliar. She looked up. An army sergeant major stood there, thick mustache, sun-creased face, sleeves rolled tight. A man carved by deployments and grave goodbyes. He studied her with eyes tired in the way only combat years could make a man tired. "You're Cade," he said, not a question, a statement. "Yes, Sergeant Major." He nodded once, sat beside her without asking. Leaders who'd bled didn't need permission to sit with someone else who had. "I heard the story," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Praise never sat comfortably on skin that knew the cost behind it. He rubbed his palms together, staring ahead. "You know what the hardest thing about getting older in this job is?" She didn't answer, but she listened. "Watching younger ones carry weight you remember nearly killed you." Marin blinked. A soft breath escaped her, not a sigh, not relief, just acknowledgement. He continued, voice steady but low. "You think the physical wounds break you, but it's the survivors you couldn't save who haunt you longer." Her throat tightened. He didn't know her story, not all the details, but somehow he understood it anyway. War made strangers family sometimes. Without names, without introductions, just shared ghosts. "You sleep yet?" he asked. "Some nightmares." She swallowed, "Sometimes." He nodded like he already knew. "They don't go away," he said. "You just learn to walk beside them instead of running from them." She stared at the horizon, the line where earth met sky like a scar. "I don't want them to go away," she whispered. "They remind me why I'm still here." His chest rose in a slow breath. "Then you're going to be strong for longer than you think." He stood, but before walking away, he added quietly, "Pain doesn't break soldiers like us. Silence does, don't let it." When he left, something inside her shifted. Not healed, just loosened. Grief uncoiled subtly, breathing instead of clenching. She didn't realize how tightly she'd been holding her own emotions until someone else's truth gave hers room. She stared at the cup in her hand. It trembled slightly. She didn't hide it, she didn't tighten her grip. She just watched the shake, small, human, honest. Footsteps again, softer this time, familiar rhythm. General Stone joined her on the bench, lowering himself slowly, face pinched with pain he didn't announce. "You're thinking," he said. She didn't glance at him. "I'm always thinking." "That's the problem." She almost smiled. Didn't realize command had time to sit with broken staff sergeants. He looked at her, tone gentle but firm. "You're not broken." "Feels like it." "Feeling isn't fact." Silence again, not heavy, just present. He rubbed his knee absently. "I spoke with division headquarters." She raised an eyebrow, wary. "About what?" "You." Her stomach tightened. "Sir." "Relax, they don't plan to meddle you and ship you home." She let out a slow breath she didn't realize she was holding. The idea of leaving before she was ready felt like being cut from the battlefield mid-fight. Not because she loved war, but because she feared losing the identity the war had sharpened. "They want you evaluated for advanced leadership training once you're medically cleared." She stared forward. "I didn't survive to get promoted." "No," he said softly. "You survived because you're stubborn and brave and refuse to die when logic says you should." Her jaw twitched. The compliment sat uneasy. "You think I deserve that?" "I don't give ranks based on deserving," he said. "I give them based on who I'd trust to lead when everything goes to hell." "And that's me." "That was you on fire with a broken leg," he said. "It will be you again when you heal." She didn't respond. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a pep talk. He wasn't boosting morale. He was stating truth like moral gravity, steady, unavoidable. Stone leaned back, breath easing. "The evaluation team wasn't here to judge you. They were here to witness you." She blinked. "Why?" "Because soldiers like you come once in a generation." She stared at him then, really stared, and she saw something she hadn't noticed before, not admiration, not gratitude. Hope. Not hope placed on her, hope found because of her. It terrified her more than bullets. Because bullets killed bodies, hope demanded you live up to it. "General," she whispered, "what if I don't want to be anyone's symbol?" Stone studied her expression. "Then be yourself, that's already enough." Somewhere deep inside, emotion stirred too hard, too sudden. She swallowed it back. Emotion didn't make her weak, but it made her exposed. And exposure in war was dangerous. A young private ran by, shouting numbers from PT training. Someone laughed near the motor pool. A helicopter lifted, blades beating air like a heart too loud. The world kept moving. Stone stood slowly, grimacing as he adjusted weight. "Walk with me." She looked at her crutches, at her bandaged leg, at the distance across the base. She nodded. They moved slow, deliberate, matching limps again. The quiet between them felt like belonging. Halfway across the yard, a Humvee rolled past, a group of junior soldiers inside. They slowed. The passenger window rolled down. A corporal leaned out slightly. "Ma'am," he hesitated. Then, with genuine respect, voice steady, "Thank you." Not a joke, not pity. Recognition. Marin nodded once. Words would have cheapened it. The Humvee rolled on. Dust swirled behind it like memory. Stone exhaled. You changed the air here. She didn't answer, because she didn't think she had. She just existed honestly and people saw it. Sometimes presence could be revolution. They stopped near the edge of the compound, where sand met fence and the horizon stretched endless. The war lived beyond that line, fear, duty, the unknown. Stone stood quietly before speaking, voice weighed with something fragile. You ever think about what comes after this? She stared at the horizon too long before answering. After war. His silence was agreement. She didn't sugarcoat. I don't know if I belong outside it. He nodded slowly, painfully. Me neither. For a moment, neither breathed. Then he said, voice nearly lost to wind, promise me something. What? When your body heals, you won't let the ghosts decide for you. Her throat tightened. If I promise, you have to promise too. He looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, he looked tired. Not physically, soul tired. I promise, he said quietly. They stood there a while, not talking, not needing to. Two silhouettes against fading light, not generals and sergeants, not medals and scars. Just two humans who bled and kept walking. Night crept in again, but this time it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a blanket, rough, familiar, necessary. She turned to him. General. Hello? She hesitated, then asked softly, does it ever stop hurting? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the sky instead, searching, or maybe remembering. No, he finally said, but you get stronger than the hurt. She nodded, breath slow, steady. She believed him. Not because she felt it yet, but because sometimes strength wasn't something you felt. It was something you grew into, one painful inch at a time. They turned back toward the camp together, limping, steady, unbroken. Not because they had no pain, but because they had purpose. And purpose, even when quiet, could carry a person farther than pride ever could. Why did progress feel more frightening than pain? 2 weeks later, the base looked the same, dust, wire, sun, tired boots marching toward duty, but something inside Marin felt different. Not healed. Healing wasn't a switch. It was a grind, a slow crawl, a constant decision. Today, she would stand without crutches for 3 seconds. That was the goal. The physical therapist whispered like it was a sacred mission briefing. 3 seconds. The battlefield had once demanded she drag men through fire and metal. Now the battlefield was her own leg, her own balance, her own trembling muscles trying to remember they once held her entire world up. She stood in the rehab tent, sweat clinging to her neck despite the coolness inside. Her palms pressed against parallel bars. The medic, young, kind eyes, quiet voice, watched without hovering. Ready? He asked. She nodded once. She shifted weight, pain flared bright, sharp, familiar. She grit her jaw, nostrils flaring, every nerve in her leg screaming protest. 1 second, 2. Her body shook. The medic leaned toward her instinctively, then stopped himself. 3 seconds. She exhaled like she'd been underwater too long and grabbed the bars again. It wasn't a victory to anyone watching. But to her, it was louder than gunfire. Because strength wasn't always the explosion. Sometimes it was the whisper. The medic smiled, not pity, not pride, just genuine warmth. That's progress, Sergeant. It's small. It's earned. She opened her mouth, then stopped, swallowing the reflexive dismissal. She didn't want to be fragile about acknowledgement anymore. She wasn't fragile. She was recovering. Thank you, she said quietly. Outside, the world kept moving. Distant shooting range rattled, helicopters stirred dust, boots marched, orders exchanged. War didn't pause for healing. But she did. For 3 seconds. After rehab, she stepped outside slowly, carefully, cane under her arm. A cane, upgraded from crutches yesterday. It felt strange, like learning to walk again meant learning to exist again. The bass was loud now, laughter from a squad returning from patrol, groans from soldiers cleaning weapons, whispered Arabic from a local interpreter reminding a young private how to say thank you. Normal war noise. And yet the moment she limped out, the noise dipped barely, but she felt it. Not pity, not curiosity. Respect. A young Marine nodded at her. She nodded back. She didn't need applause, but quiet acknowledgement felt like a salve on raw skin. She moved toward the chow hall, slow but steady. Pain traveled with her like a shadow, but it no longer pinned her. It walked beside her now. Inside, trays clattered. Laughter echoed. Soldiers griped about food and heat and orders, and everything young troops griped about when they didn't yet understand some complaints meant you were still alive. She moved through the line, one dish, then another. A corporal stepped aside to give her space. Not awkward, instinctual, learned respect. The same SEALs from that first day sat at a table near the entrance, quieter now. Different energy. They saw her. All of them stood. She froze. The tall one, the one who mocked her most, stepped forward. He looked older now, like shame aged him faster than combat could. "Sergeant," he said softly, "may we join you for lunch?" She blinked. War teaches you to identify sincerity like it's a survival instinct. This wasn't performative. It wasn't guilt-driven obedience. It was humility, growth, maybe redemption. "Yes," she said simply. They sat. No one spoke for a moment. Trays scraped, spoons clinked. The SEAL who led the apology stared at his food, swallowed hard, then spoke. "I talked to my sister last week," he said. "She's a Marine. Always thought she exaggerated what she dealt with. I was wrong." Marin didn't respond. He looked at her. "You taught me that. The way I spoke to you, it wasn't about you. It was about my ignorance." His voice cracked slightly. "I won't forget that lesson." She didn't soften, didn't harden, she just listened. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just be better for the people coming after you." "We will," he whispered. Silence again, comfortable now, not heavy. She ate slow, presence enough. After lunch, she stepped outside, letting warm air coat her skin. Her leg ached, cane clicking steadily on concrete. She didn't mind. Progress came with pain. Pain meant movement. Movement meant hope. Stone approached from across the courtyard, flanked by a captain carrying paperwork. When he reached her, he dismissed the captain with a nod and slowed his pace to match hers. "You look stronger," he said. "I stood for 3 seconds today." His face lit, subtle pride flickering. 3 seconds is a long time when muscles remember fire. It felt like forever. That's because battle changes time, pain stretches it, healing stretches it more. She smirked faintly. "I hate it." He chuckled, a sound of a man who rarely let himself laugh. "Hate means fight. Fight means you haven't surrendered." "You think I'll ever stop being a soldier?" He stopped walking. She turned to face him. "No," he said, "but that's not a sentence. It's an identity. A soldier isn't who you are in war. It's who you are when you refuse to give up on yourself." She swallowed. He didn't break her gaze. "Being a soldier," he finished softly, "is not about carrying a rifle. It's about carrying purpose." She didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. They walked again, until they reached the edge of camp, where barbed wire framed mountains like teeth guarding the horizon. "Things change soon," Stone murmured. She stiffened. "Orders. Transfer, medical rotation. You're headed to Landstuhl first, then stateside therapy." She stared at the ground. "I'm not ready to leave." "You are." "I don't feel ready." "Feeling isn't fact," he repeated gently. She exhaled, breath shook once. "I don't want to disappear." "You won't. They'll forget." "People forget battles," he said. "They don't forget the ones who taught them how to fight." For the first time since she woke in that field hospital, her eyes stung not from pain, but from the aching truth that maybe she did matter to more than chaos. Will you, she hesitated. Vulnerability was harder than any firefight. Still check in, after I go. He didn't react with surprise or pity, just warmth, human warmth, rare and real. I'll visit, he said, not as a general, as someone who owes his life to you and his hope. She blinked hard, jaw clenched, emotion rising like tide. She swallowed it down. War didn't punish tears, but she punished herself when she let them show at the wrong moment. But this wasn't war anymore. And she wasn't weak for feeling. She breathed deep, slow. Okay, she whispered. That single word felt like surrender, not to pain, but to possibility. They stood at the fence in silence, watching mountains fade into dusk. Her leg trembled. She leaned on her cane, not ashamed. Stone noticed. Sit. She nodded. They sat on a crate, side by side, like equals in wounds if not in rank. The wind carried sand. A desert bird called somewhere far off. A convoy rumbled in the distance, headlights slicing dust. Do you know what scares me most? She asked quietly. Tell me. That when I leave here, I won't know who I am if I'm not bleeding for something. Stone looked forward, face reflecting twilight's gray. You'll bleed again, he said softly, just not always in ways you can see. She considered that. It hurts, she murmured. Living, he asked. Letting go. He nodded slowly. Every warrior must learn a second life. Some struggle, some don't start trying soon enough. You're starting now, that's courage. She shut her eyes. Air burned her lungs, but it felt cleansing, real. Do you ever wish you didn't survive? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. Then. Sometimes, he said, but then I remember the ones who didn't, and I live harder for them. She opened her eyes, watched the horizon blur slightly. I want that, she said, to live for them, not instead of them. You will. How do you know? Because you're afraid, he said. Only people who fear failure try hard enough to rise. She nodded, breath catching. A distant call echoed across camp. Shift change. Soldiers moving, duty reshuffling. Life continued. She looked at him, voice barely audible. When do I stop hurting? When the pain becomes direction instead of weight. And if it never does, then you carry it anyway because you can. She drew a slow breath, grounding in the truth. She was not finished. She was transitioning, not out of war, but into a new battle. A fight to rebuild, to belong in peace after surviving chaos. To stand not just physically, but in identity, purpose, dignity. She gripped her cane, fingers firm, tears drying before they ever fell. And she whispered to herself, soft, trembling, determined. 3 seconds today, 4 tomorrow. Stone nodded gently. That's how mountains are moved. They sat until darkness wrapped the camp, until pain settled into acceptance again, until silence felt like strength instead of emptiness. She wasn't healed. She was healing. And sometimes that was stronger. Why did leaving the battlefield feel harder than entering it? 3 days before her departure, the base felt different. Not to anyone else. To them it was another rotation, another sunrise over dust and wire. But to Marin, every detail felt sharpened, like her senses wanted to memorize the world she was being forced to step away from. The grit in the wind, the distant thump of mortar drills, the low laughter of soldiers trying to pretend fear didn't exist. The smell, sweat, fuel, dirt, determination. This wasn't beauty. But it was home. She leaned on her cane as she walked past the motor pool, leg throbbing with each step, healing pain now, not dying pain. A sergeant fixing an engine lifted his chin in acknowledgement. She nodded back. Respect didn't roar here, it lived in silence, in eye contact, in shared grit. A young private, barely 20, jogged past her and stopped suddenly, nervous, breath quick. Sergeant Cade. She turned, yes. He swallowed, My sister, she's in the army, training to deploy. He hesitated, cheeks reddening. I told her about you. Marin blinked. Why? Because she thinks she won't make it. Because she thinks being scared means she doesn't belong. His voice trembled, not from weakness, from sincerity. I told her strength doesn't always walk straight, he whispered. Sometimes it limps. Marin didn't expect it. Emotion swept through her chest like a quiet wave. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just real. She nodded once. She'll be fine, she said softly. Fear keeps you sharp. Courage is acting anyway. He breathed out, relief loosening his shoulders. Thank you, ma'am. When he jogged away, she closed her eyes for just a second. Not to escape, to hold the moment. She once believed strength was steel, unbreakable, unbending. Now she knew better. Real strength bent, real strength shook, real strength kept moving. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Later she sat outside medical, leg elevated, sun baking her skin. A nurse wrapped fresh bandages, gentle, quick, practiced hands. When she finished, she didn't walk away immediately. You know, the nurse said quietly, some soldiers leave here and try to pretend it never happened. Marin looked at her. Does that work? Sometimes, the nurse shrugged, until it doesn't. Silence. Then carefully the nurse added, don't bury what you survived. Let it shape you, not swallow you. Marin exhaled slowly, pain and truth settling in her lungs. I'll try. Trying is all anyone does, the nurse replied. When she left the clinic, she saw it, a small wooden crate near the barracks entrance. On top of it sat a folded American flag and a pair of boots. A memorial. Someone else didn't make it last night. She felt the world go quiet around her. Pain changed shape, not personal, not physical, collective, heavy, ancient. Loss was constant here, but it never lost its weight. A Marine stood beside the boots, head bowed. His voice cracked as he whispered a quiet, private eulogy no one else could hear. Marin lowered her chin, honoring someone she never met. The living mourned. The dead watched. And the war kept moving. She walked away slowly, pressing her palm once against her thigh to ground herself. Pain steadied her. Pain reminded her she was still here to feel it. That afternoon, she found herself near the perimeter fence again, same spot she'd shared with Stone the week before. Beyond it, mountains stood like silent witnesses to decades of hardship. Hard ground, hard lives, hard choices. She breathed dust and memory. If you're trying to sneak off base, a familiar voice said behind her, you're terrible at it. She didn't turn. General. Stone came to stand beside her, no crutches today, but still limping. His injury had changed him too. Not made him smaller, made him quieter in a way that commanded more respect. You'll be on a plane soon, he said. Feels like being extracted. It is a form of extraction. She exhaled. I hate it. So did I the first time. You got used to it. No, he smiled faintly. I just learned that leaving a battlefield isn't abandoning it. She studied the wire fence, jaw tight. And what if I'm not ready? No one is ready, he paused. We only leave when the war gives us permission, not when we want to, and the war has decided you've earned rest. Rest. The word felt foreign, suspicious, heavy, like something she didn't trust. I don't know how to rest. That's why you have to learn. She swallowed. What if I fail at being normal? Stone didn't laugh, didn't soften. He answered like the question deserved respect. You won't fail, you'll adapt. Soldiers don't fail at life. We just don't ease into it. Her throat tightened. And if I can't? Then you'll stand again, just like you did with the fire, just like you did with the cane, one painful inch at a time. Silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It carried warmth now, familiarity. Have you thought about what you'll do? He asked. No. You'll find it. Or it finds me. Maybe both. A soft wind brushed sand along their boots. She stared at the horizon. "I'm scared," she whispered. Stone nodded. "Good." She looked at him sharply. "It means you're not numb," he said. "Fear is the last proof we care about something." "Care about what?" "Who we become next." Her eyes burned, not tears, but pressure, like emotions lived behind a locked door she hadn't found the key for yet. She shifted weight, pain sparked up her leg. She winced, breath hitching. Stone noticed. "Sit." She obeyed without resistance, lowering herself onto a sandbag. He sat beside her, moving slowly. "Tomorrow they'll clap for you," he said. "Command, doctors, even the SEALs." She grimaced. "I don't want applause." "I know," he smiled gently. "You want anonymity, peace." "Yes." "You'll have it, but not because people forget. They won't." He paused. "You'll have it because you'll learn to carry your story without feeling like you owe it to anyone." She stared at him. "You're not leaving in shame," he said. "You're leaving in honor." Something inside her cracked, not broken but softened, opened. She whispered, "You think I'll come back?" He didn't hesitate. "I think the world will ask you to." "And will I say yes?" "That answer changes over time," he replied. "Right now, yes. Someday, maybe. And one day you'll say no, not because you're weaker, because you'll have built a life worth staying for." She held his gaze. "And you?" He looked at the mountains, jaw tightening. "I'm learning the same lesson you are." She nodded, understanding deeper than words. They sat in silence, two wounded warriors sitting where war met horizon, where endings and beginnings looked the same. Soldiers walked by occasionally, heads dipping in quiet respect, not starring, not pitying, recognizing. Finally Stone stood. "Come on, one more walk through base." She rose, leaning on her cane. "If I fall." "I'll fall with you," he said. She huffed a soft laugh and followed him. Slow steps, steady rhythm, pain with purpose. As they moved, soldiers across the yard paused, not in shock, not in confusion, in honor. Not because she was invincible, but because she wasn't, and she kept walking anyway. A sergeant whispered to her squad, "That's what strong looks like." Someone else murmured, "She earned every step." Marin didn't react outwardly. But inside, where doubt had lived for weeks, something shifted. Not peace, not relief, just belief. In herself, in survival, in tomorrow. As dusk fell, she and Stone stopped at the center of camp. "You ready?" he asked quietly. "No," she said. He smiled. "Perfect." Because readiness wasn't bravery, showing up anyway was. She breathed in dust one last time. Let it settle in her lungs like memory, like soil she'd grown roots in. She was leaving soon, but she wasn't gone. Pain didn't own her now, purpose did. Tomorrow she would board a plane. Tonight she stood tired, scarred, alive. Not leaving war. Carrying part of it with her. Not broken. Becoming. Why did silence feel louder in safety? Landstuhl Military Hospital was clean. Too clean. Sterile hallways, polished floors, soft lights, organized voices. The smell wasn't dust and fuel anymore. It was disinfectant. The world here didn't echo with mortars. It hummed with machines, soft footsteps, quiet reassurance. And yet, Marin felt more exposed here than she ever did in combat. On deployment, fear had purpose. Pain had context. Out here, pain just existed, without an enemy to blame, without a mission to justify it. The only thing to fight was time and self-doubt. That kind of war was harder. She lay on a therapy table while a physical therapist worked her leg gently, moving it inch by inch. Every inch burned. A slow fire. A reminder that rebuilding was not heroic. It was humiliating, repetitive, frustrating. "Breathe," the therapist murmured. She exhaled. Sweat formed at her temples. She didn't groan, didn't wince outwardly, but her hands trembled against the table. You're pushing too hard, he said. I'm behind, she whispered. I need to catch up. Behind who? She stared at the ceiling. Everyone. He sighed softly. You're not in competition with ghosts. She flinched, not physically, internally, like he touched a bruise no one saw. The therapist released her leg. We stop here today. I can go more. Maybe, but healing isn't punishment. You don't earn recovery faster by suffering harder. She hated the truth in that sentence. On the battlefield, pain was proof of commitment. Here, pain was a limit, and she had never respected limits, not when lives were on the line. But now, the life on the line was hers. She sat up slowly, jaw tight. The therapist watched her with quiet understanding, not pity. Pity was soft, watery. His gaze felt steady, like someone who knew strength wasn't volume. It was endurance. You okay? He asked. She nodded once. I don't like being weak. You're not weak, you're injured. There's a difference. Yes, he said. Injury heals, weakness hides behind pride. She held his eyes, then looked away. Pride wasn't armor here, it was weight. Heavy, suffocating, misplaced. She slid off the table and reached for her cane. He didn't touch it, didn't offer to help. She appreciated that more than anything. She walked out slow, uneven but moving. In the hallway, wounded soldiers sat in wheelchairs or moved with walkers. Some joked. Some stared blankly. Some cried quietly with therapists holding their shoulders. Pain lived in everyone differently. Sergeant Cade. She stopped. A nurse approached with a clipboard. Check in with psych support at 1400. She stiffened. I don't need. It isn't optional. The nurse smiled gently. It isn't punishment, it's maintenance. Marin nodded stiffly. She didn't fear bullets or fire, but talking about feelings. Terrifying. Later she sat in a small office. Books lined the walls. No uniforms, just calm colors and soft chairs. The doctor, mid-50s, quiet voice, sat across from her. You look uncomfortable, he said. She stared at the floor. I don't like sitting still. You sat still to save your life. That was different. How? There was a reason. And this is. She clenched her jaw, silence stretched, then. I don't know how to do this. Which part? She swallowed, being safe. The doctor leaned forward. Safety is not absence of danger, it's absence of purpose. Her chest tightened. Yes, that was it. That was the ache she couldn't name. Without danger, who was she? I feel useless, she whispered. You're healing. It feels like hiding. You survived, that isn't hiding. She closed her eyes. It doesn't feel like surviving, it feels like waiting. For what? She opened her eyes. For someone to need me again. Silence filled the room, not judgmental, not heavy. Tell me, the doctor said gently, do you know how to need yourself? She froze, breath caught. She didn't answer because she didn't know. Therapy wasn't bleeding out on sand while helicopters roared overhead. It wasn't heroism. It was vulnerability, and vulnerability didn't come with medals. She left the room later feeling like she'd walked 10 miles instead of talking for 40 minutes. Back in her barrack-style recovery room, she sat on her bed and stared at folded uniforms on the shelf. The fabric looked foreign now, too clean, too still. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, U.S. government prefix. She answered. Sergeant Cade, General Stone's voice said, warm, steady, familiar, checking in. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She wasn't prepared. How's the leg? He asked. It moves, she breathed. How about you? She paused. I don't know yet. That's an honest answer, he said. Better than pretending. Silence, not awkward, grounding. Do you miss it? She whispered. The fight. Yes. Every day, Stone said quietly. But missing isn't craving. It's remembering who we were. It's not who we have to stay. She looked down at her hand. It trembled slightly again. I feel small. You're not small, you're focused. Pain turns the world narrow for a while. What if I never widen again? You will, a beat. And if you don't, you'll still stand. Narrow strength is still strength. She swallowed. I hate not knowing what comes next. That's not weakness, that's humanity. Another silence. I'll come visit soon, he said. Don't, she whispered, unexpected instinct. Not yet. A pause. You think seeing someone who understands will break you. She breathed out slowly. Maybe. Then I'll wait, he said quietly. Not because I think you'll break, but because you want to face yourself first. She closed her eyes. It hurt. It helped. One more thing, Sergeant Cade. Yes, sir. You don't owe strength every minute. You can rest without surrendering. Her voice trembled, trying. That's all you've ever needed to do. He hung up. She sat still, phone in her lap, breath shaking. She wasn't strong today. But she wasn't weak. She was trying, and trying was enough to stay alive. Later, as darkness fell outside the windows, she stood with effort and walked to them. City lights glowed in the distance, civilization calm, distant from war. She touched the glass with her palm, cool, smooth. Her reflection looked foreign, hair shorter, eyes older, soul heavier but alive. A whisper escaped her lips, shaky, raw but real. I'll get through this. And for the first time since leaving Afghanistan, she believed it, not fully, not confidently, but enough. Healing wasn't glory. It was grit. Quiet grit. And she had always been made of that. Tomorrow would hurt, and she would stand anyway. 1 second more. 1 inch further. 1 breath deeper. This wasn't the battlefield she trained for. But maybe, just maybe, it was the battlefield that would remake her. Why did coming home feel like walking into someone else's life? 3 months later, Marin stepped off a shuttle bus in front of a modest apartment building near a military base in the States. Normal sidewalk, normal traffic, normal sky. Normal hurt more than shrapnel ever did. No sand in the air, no rumble of generators, no radio chatter, just distant lawn mowers, dogs barking, wind against tree branches. She held her duffel bag over one shoulder, the cane clutched in her other hand. Her leg was stronger now, not whole yet, but stronger. Pain still lived there, smaller, quieter, like a roommate you tolerated because they paid part of the rent. She looked up at her building. She had imagined this moment for weeks. She felt nothing. That scared her more than any bullet ever had. Inside, the apartment was small, clean, empty, army furniture, neutral colors, a bed that looked too soft, a couch that felt untouched, kitchen quiet like it had never known late-night coffee before deployment briefs. She dropped the duffel. It landed with a thud that echoed. Silence followed. She lowered herself onto the couch slowly. No adrenaline now, no mission, no orders, just her heartbeat, loud in her ears, too loud. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She answered on instinct, Cade. A young voice hesitated. Is this Staff Sergeant Cade? Yes. This is Specialist Hart. I served under Colonel Ramos in Kuwait. The general gave me your number. She blinked. General Stone. Yes, ma'am. He said if I ever felt lost coming back, I could call you. Marin's chest tightened. Lost. The soldier's voice cracked. I don't know how to be home. She closed her eyes. The ache inside her shifted, not pain, not fear. Recognition. The invisible weight soldiers carried into civilian air. She didn't lie. It's hard. Does it get easier? She thought about the hospital, the therapy, the nights crying silently so no one would hear, the mornings she forced herself to stand even when her body begged to lie down forever. And then she thought about the first time she laughed again, unexpected, real. The first morning she woke without dread. The first time she stood without leaning on the cane. The first slow run. The first moment she didn't measure her worth by scars. It gets different, she said, and different becomes better. The young soldier exhaled, relieved. Thank you, ma'am. Call again if you need, she said, any time. When she hung up, her hand trembled slightly, but not from fear, from purpose returning. Sometimes service didn't end, it changed shape. Her phone buzzed again, an incoming video call. General Stone. She froze, pulse quickening, not from trauma, from connection. She answered. He sat in a quiet office, uniform neat, leg brace still visible under the desk. Lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze steady, warm. You made it home, he said. Physically, she replied. That's step one. You. Still limping, he smiled slightly. But I walk, we both do. She nodded, swallowing emotion she didn't bother hiding this time. With him, she didn't need armor. How's the adjustment? He asked. Hard. It should be, he said softly. You lived a life most people never glimpse. You don't just drop out of that, you transition. And if I don't do it right? There is no right, he said. There is only forward. She breathed slowly. Sometimes I miss it. The war. No, she shook her head. The clarity, the knowing who I was every second. He nodded with the tired wisdom of someone who'd had that same thought for years. Peace feels uncertain, but uncertainty means possibility. She didn't answer, not out of defiance, because she was learning possibility again. By the way, he said lightly, I got a letter from those SEALs. She lifted an eyebrow. They're still embarrassed, he smirked, and they're better soldiers for it. She huffed a small laugh, genuine. She didn't expect to laugh today. Stone noticed, his smile softened. You're healing. Slow. Slow is still forward. They sat in silence, two warriors who didn't know each other words to understand. You know, he said quietly, you don't have to prove anything anymore. She stared at him. I'm not proving, I'm rebuilding. That's harder, he nodded, and braver. She swallowed. What happens now? You live, he said, and one day, without realizing it, you'll stop surviving and start living. And if I stumble? You will, he said, and then you'll stand. That's who you are. Her throat tightened again, but she didn't fight the feeling. Pain wasn't her enemy now. It was her history. We're still here, Marin, he said softly. Yes, she whispered, we are. And we rise. She nodded slowly. We rise. They ended the call. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt like breath, patient, steady, forgiving. She walked to the window, no cane. Slow, limping, but independent. Outside, people walked dogs, kids played, life moved without fear. She watched them like someone learning a language again. She opened the window. Air rushed in, different air, softer. Fresh. She whispered to herself, not as a command, not as a battle cry, as a promise. I deserve to come back. Her voice trembled, not from doubt, from truth breaking through the surface. She steadied herself against the frame, grounded here. She was a soldier. She was wounded. She was healing. She was home. She was not finished. She didn't need to be whole yet. She just needed to keep choosing forward. Tomorrow she would walk again, farther than today. Tomorrow she would stretch, strengthen, try. Tomorrow she would let herself live a little more. She closed her eyes, breathed in, and whispered the quiet creed of every warrior who survives the fire and faces the quiet afterward. One more day. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand to be seen. It simply rises, even if slow, even if shaking, and keeps walking. Strength isn't loud. Courage isn't clean, and the bravest hearts are the ones that heal without applause. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.